Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Messias here. I just wanted to share with you guys a couple of different examples of how to simplify square roots. So the first thing that we need to know is that when we have a number that's under this symbol, A, that this is called the square root, and that B, the number under the square root, is called the radicand. So I wrote out two different examples. Miss Abel's going to be going through this one with us, and I'm going to be going through this one with us. And the reason why I wrote both of them side by side is because this one just has numbers. This one has numbers and letters. Two different things, right? Right. So the example that I'm going to go through with you guys just has numbers. Okay? So there's lots of different ways that I could simplify this radical. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to think what times what gives me 1200. Well, I know it ends in a 0, so I know it divides by 10. So if you need your calculator, I would totally go and grab it. If not, maybe use your phone for your calculator. So you might need to put this video on pause for a second. So I'm just going to tell you, it is 120. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to break up my 10 into 2 times 5. Those are the smallest numbers that can be multiplied to give me a 10. 2 doesn't break up any further other than 1 times 2, and 5 doesn't break up further than 1 times 5. So those two numbers are prime. They don't break up any further. Now over here, I have 120. You might be asking yourself, well, what if I did it differently? What if I took 1,200 and I divided it by 2? Because sometimes people just think, okay, well, I can cut it in half. What's half of 1,200? Everybody does it different. So after I get through this example, I'm going to show you a couple of other ways, and of course there's several others in addition to the ways I'm going to show you. The important thing is that we all get to the same answer. So when I have 120, I know that 12 times 10 gives me 120, and my 10 breaks up into 2 times 5. 2 times 5 gives me 10. Again, just like up here, 2 and 5 are my smallest factors of 10. And I have 12 here, and 12 breaks up into 3 times 4. 3 is done. 3 is prime. It doesn't break up into anything smaller other than 1 times 3, or 1 in itself. And 4 breaks up into 2 times 2. So now, let's see how many 2's I have. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to put all of those numbers under my square root. So I've got 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 2's times my 1, 3, which is there, times 5 times 5, because I have 2 5's. Those are done. All right, so all of my prime numbers are under here. Now remember, when we are simplifying the square root, we got to find two numbers that are the same. These two are going to leave the house together, and they're going to walk outside. Because 2 times 2 is the same thing as the square root of 4. And I know that the square root of 4 is the same thing as 2. If that confuses you, don't even worry about that. Just find two numbers that are the same. They walk outside together. And when you have more than one number outside of the square root, they're going to multiply by each other. And I have another pair of 5's. He's going to leave the house. And when they leave the house, we've got one pair of 5's. Okay? If that's a little confusing to you, just hang tight for a little bit. I'll show you a couple of other examples that are similar. So if I have 5 outside the square root and 2 and another 2 outside the square root, I'm going to multiply those numbers together. So I've got 2 times 2, 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4 times 5 gives me the square root of 3. 3 was left, the number that was left under the square root. So that number is going to stay under the square root. Okay? Now, I got to finish multiplying these guys here. I could have done 5 times 2, which is 10, and then 10 times 2 is 20. Or you could have just, done it step by step. 5 times 4 gives you 20 root 3. Like I said, there's lots of different ways that you could set up your factor tree. A couple of different ways that you could have maybe like shown your work here. Some people don't need to show their work, so you need to do what's best for you. So I'm going to flip my page back because this example here is just like what I did on the page when I showed you each of the different steps. Okay, so like I said, there's more than one way to solve a problem. Over here, I showed you how you can break it up in half and how it breaks down here. You break this number in half and you get here. You take this and you divide it in half and you get here. And then I took 15 times 10 and then I split each of these up. So if you notice, each time that got me the same numbers under that square root. When I find a pair, when my 2 finds its buddy, they cancel out and they go outside of the square root. 2's make a pair and they go outside the square root. My 5's make a pair, it goes outside of the square root, and I multiply together my numbers outside of the square root, and my 3 is left over. I did the same thing down here, except the only thing that I did different here was I left my 10's the same. The reason I did that because if I have 2 numbers that are the same, those numbers that are the same get canceled out and go outside of the square root. And I end up with the same numbers and the same answers as the other problems. So the only thing that I didn't do was break up those 2 10's like I did up here. You'll still get to the same answer. So if you can identify that you have 2 numbers that are the same thing, you can stop right there. Those are your pairs, and it moves outside of the square root. Hopefully that kind of broke it down a little bit for you, maybe brought some memories back from before break. And hang tight because Miss Abels is going to go through the next example with you. Just remember, this one has letters, this one does not. Good luck!